Hello and welcome to the crux of medtech. We go beyond the buzzwords, bringing you the insights from the innovators, investors, and leaders who are driving this life-saving space forward. Because I'm absolutely fascinated by the stories that people have to tell in medtech. As someone who works in this sector on a daily basis, I come across so many interesting people and so many interesting stories that I think the world deserves to know about. Welcome to the crux of medtech.
Hello, Peter, and welcome to the crux of medtech.
Hey, how's it going, Henry?
Very good, thank you. Very good. So, as we always do, it'd be great to kick off with a bit more about you. So, Peter, why don't you tell us your story and how you got into medtech?
Yeah, absolutely. I started my career as an intern at Stryker. I worked on a knee implant that got implanted into millions of patients, and I really learned to love everything about orthopedic surgery. Spent several years at Stryker and then on my own startup. Back at Stryker, and my early company got acquired by Tournier a few years later after I left Stryker again, and then of course Tournier ended up back at Stryker. So I'm always afraid of everything being acquired by Stryker now.
Fair enough. So what fascinated you about the orthopedics industry? Why did you stick around orthopedics?
I love the fact that I got to work with surgeons. I got to attend surgery. I could make something that within weeks or months could go into a surgical experience. And it was really nice to be able to interact. And it's such a great group of people. Everyone's trying hard. You know, it's not heart surgery. So if the patient has a millimeter off of a position of something, you know, things aren't going to be catastrophic. That's actually a pretty good result, where sometimes in heart surgery you need that micro precision.
Okay. So you've been around the startup world a little while and had one acquired. Why don't you dive into a bit more about the story behind how you started up your own company, what it was doing, and tell me about the journey.
Sure. I was reading a bunch of entrepreneurship books at my first job when I was working at Stryker out of college, and I was really intrigued by what was possible. And I had this project that I took for like $750,000. We developed this new knee system. And it just required a fair amount of very little capital in the grand scheme of things. And it was really successful. The surgeons started putting it in and they loved it and they wanted a different version of it. So we made another one. And as that was all going on, I kind of felt like, oh, I could do this on my own. You know, when you're young and you don't know that the things you don't know, it's a really powerful thing. So it was an exciting time to be at Stryker because it was I started right before the acquisition of Helmetica. And then I was there during the acquisition and then after full time. And I saw very different cultures. I saw a culture of speed and small teams. And then after the merger, it was a much bigger organization. It was more like how Medica was structured, and it wasn't really a fit for me. So I started my own company with just a lot of confidence in myself and the team we put together.
Okay, cool. So you brought it all together. Talk me through how that startup went. Like, how did you bring it all together beyond that? How did you build the technology? Talk me through the journey until acquisition.
Sure. So the first company was super quick. It was 3 fraternity brothers that all worked at Stryker at some point. And we believed that we had nice complementary skill sets to build a company. We had about $100,000 to play with between, you know, I mortgaged my house. It was another guy's life savings and it was another guy's retirement 401k that he cashed out. So we pulled together that money, bought computers, built some prototypes. We were actually making a lot of our own prototypes in my basement. There was one day we realized we needed to do it in the garage because the fumes. And we had to go for a long walk to kind of get clear. Our heads were not very clear with the fumes of the stuff we're using. But then, you know, 15 months after start, we were acquired. And that process started probably 11 to 12 months into the company. So it wasn't what we intended to do. We originally just looked for investment, but the investment led to an acquisition.
Okay, that was the Stryker acquisition, that first one.
It was actually acquired by a company called Nexa Orthopedics. Health
Okay.
Point Capital had acquired us, merged us with Nexa. Then Nexa was acquired by Tournier 3, 4 months after we were acquired, and then Tournier merged with Wright. If you think back, like this is like 6 years later,
Yeah.
7 years later, and then and Tournier was acquired by Stryker. So
Okay.
there was a few. We went public at Tournier during that time before the Wright merger. There was a lot of years between those two events, and I had left right around 2009 to start my own consulting firm, and that eventually led to my next startup, which was a preoperative planning workflow solution.
Okay, cool. So a few startups and quite entrepreneurial from the get go. Then, so talk me through that. Then, so you've gone through those acquisitions. You've got a preoperative planning software company that you developed as well. So, like, what gives you that fire to keep on going and keep on starting these new companies? Like, what is it that's driving you towards these new spaces?
I think ultimately there's the opportunity to kind of make something from nothing that I just can't. I can't give up. The idea that you can build something from the ground up, build the team, develop the technologies. I think those are the kind of things that keep drawing me back to it. This is startup number 3 I'm on now, and it's really it's unique. When you come into a big organization, or even like an organization that's been around for several years, you end up being you have to figure out where you fit, right? Um, I noticed that for like a couple months, I went to work as a CTO of a company, and I was trying to figure out, how do I fit into this? And it's very different than when you're starting from scratch.
Yeah.
I think I had like 75 not direct reports, people under my team. I had like 8 or so direct reports. And with that, I felt like I didn't choose the team. These are the people that were here. This was the structure. These were the projects. It's very different
Yeah.
versus when you start something from scratch, you get to assemble that, and you get to build the team, and you get to find the right people to work with.
Awesome. So that brings us on to startup number 3 then, Redefine Surgery, where you're at right now. So where did the idea for Redefine come about, and what does Redefine do?
Yeah, I think the first time I started thinking about it was maybe a month after I left my last startup. I was thinking about what I wanted out of the next one. And I realized I wanted to get back into surgery. So I wanted to be in surgeries more, and I wanted to spend more time with surgeons in the OR. And I also realized that a lot of the technology we were developing for preoperative planning, once you got into the surgical room, everything kind of changes, right? So sometimes it works great, and sometimes it doesn't. So you do a preoperative plan. We built software that built 3D printed instruments for the surgery, like patient specific instruments. Sometimes they fit great. Sometimes they don't fit great. Sometimes you can put them in the right spot, and the team had developed that and made it more robust over time after I left. But there's always a difference between when you get the original plan and when the patient gets the imaging, and then you have this moment in time after that when they're actually doing the surgery, because you've got to print the parts, and you've got to clean the parts and inspect the parts, etc. So during that time, sometimes the patient's anatomy changes. Sometimes there's just some differences in the tolerances of things. So if I looked at a company, I wanted to do something intraoperative, something that could be changed intraoperatively. And that's the one thing I noticed with robotic surgery. People did a lot of adjustments to the original plan during the procedure because they have new data that they didn't have preoperatively.
Okay. So what data do they not have preoperatively that when they go in there and start the surgery, they just realize it's different? What's wrong in that process, and what's stopping them having the right data preoperatively?
I mean, the patient's closed, right? Like pre-op, there's no incision. You can't open the bone. You can't inspect what's in there. You can't remove osteophytes, right? So Preoperative, you're just looking at the outside of the knee and how it moves. You're watching the patient walk up and down the hallway. So you're limited because you're not doing the surgery. So you can only do so much pre-op. And that's why if you can think about what could you develop intraoperative. And when I started to see robotic procedures intraoperatively, there's a lot of delay. Right now, the way they do surgery, it takes a lot of time, and it really slows down the procedure. There's some people, I've seen some surgeons do a very concise, quick surgery in surgical robotics, but that's not the common scenario. The common scenario is it's longer than a traditional knee. And there have been surgeons that have gotten that time down, but there's a lot of steps involved with around marking the bone and identifying the bony geometry and putting the fiducials. All those steps I felt like could be sped up with technology. And now about a year and a half later, we've proven that's correct.
Yeah.
So that was a big belief that instead of doing it the way we've been doing it for 20 years, that we could do it purely with an optical vision system and not need markers on the patient's anatomy.
Okay, awesome. So what we're talking about here is really artificial intelligence and building AI for it. So you've talked quite detailed about robotics there. Is this just a pure robotics play, or is there also outside of robotics a play with the AI?
Yeah, we're an artificial intelligence company that powers robotics, and we're using a vision system that will be robotic during the procedure. So right now, a lot of cameras are just there, and they have to be positioned by a person. They're very expensive and very costly. We're building a vision system that adjusts and moves to the right position, provides the right lighting for the patient and the surgeon, most importantly, and then understands what it's seeing from an optical perspective. So it understands that these are his hands or her hands. It understands that this is the scalpel. And it understands that that instrument belongs along this axis, or these pins belong in this position.
Okay, cool. So let's really dive into this then. So how have you built the technology, and how does it actually work? Where's the data set coming from, and what does it really give to the physician or the surgical robot that it didn't have before?
Yeah, good question. So first off, I built very little. It's all been the team around me. So first thing I did is I found a great team, and then from that, we tested and tried a lot of things. So types of cameras, types of positions of cameras. We've been into over 100 surgeries and been able to experiment with where can you place things without getting in the way. One day I imagine there'll be redefined vision system in the operating room light above the surgery, but we know we're not going to be able to start there. We've got to be able to something we can easily bring into the OR, and that's the form factor we're at now. Okay.
So when we talked about this, you're talking about vision system right now, but Redefine is really acting as the brain of the system. What does that really mean? What does the brain part do?
Yeah, good point. So the brain understands the entire procedure, understands when the surgeon is cutting and incising. One day we'll understand how to do that incision. Right now we're still training the model to understand the more nuanced aspects. The AI today is tackling bone and really understanding the position of bone and the position of instruments in relation to that bone. So if you have one bone floating around and let's say this is the femur, and you have another instrument coming in to understand where that instrument belongs to put a pin in at the right place. And this kind of technology is basically going to eliminate, I think, a lot of the way we think about robotics. So we can place pins or saws, cuts, or instruments, manual instruments even, in places that are now navigated instead of using a giant 6 degree of freedom arm to place a pin.
I'm interrupting this episode to bring you a word from our sponsors, TTP. TTP is a leader in complex medical technology development with deep scientific and engineering expertise. They support ambitious medtech companies in solving high-risk, high-complexity challenges where there's no margin for error. Whether you're tackling uncharted technical territory or racing to bring a product to market, TTP provide clarity and direction. By de-risking innovation and ensuring seamless alignment with regulatory and manufacturing demands, TTP help you move forward with speed and confidence. To find out more, check out the show notes.
And we wanted to, as part of this, one of the core objectives was that we wanted to demystify AI in surgery. So we want to make it accessible to a broad and wide medtech audience. So from your side, how are you demystifying AI for surgeons, for the general audience? How are you doing that?
Yeah, I think the way to think about it is with all artificial intelligence, even from its earliest days, when you first see it, it kind of felt like magic. So a lot of it's like, I don't know if you go back far enough in time, I'm a little bit older than you. So the first time I was able to read text from a book that I took a picture of and convert that into actual text, it was pretty impressive. Then it was a few years later, 5, 10 years later, I saw it with handwriting. It started being able to catch handwriting. Those are some of the earliest forms of AI. Like if we remember the moment like in 2022 when ChatGPT kind of came out to the world, that became a very big moment because it became more obvious. And then every release since has been pretty impressive how they've amazed us in how smart the AI is. We don't use an LLM. That's a large language model. We don't use that type of technology for what we're doing. It's a different type of artificial intelligence that is understanding where a bone is or an instrument or some other object like my hands or retractors, etc. It understands where they are in space in 6 degrees of freedom. So understanding the true position of that object in space and how it moves over time.
Okay. And what does that enable? So the tracking is one thing, but what does the AI actually tell the surgeon, or what data does it provide to the surgeon beyond just tracking what each piece is doing?
Yeah, in the early days, it's really just understands the position, and based on the plan that they originally went in with, the adjustments. We're also developing a tool that'll understand the ligament balancing of a knee, for example. So to understand how the knee is functioning during the surgery and give them similar charts to what they're seeing now. So what I'll say is that a lot of the technology we're using is very similar to what they've been using for some time. But the difference is it used to require a very complex, expensive vision system attached to a computer that would understand the position of all these fiducials in space. So you'd have to register, you'd have to put screws into the bone in the original embodiments that people are using today. You then have to like touch the bone in like 35 different points to understand where that bone is. And all that takes time and slows down the procedure.
Okay.
We're able to just do an instant capture of the bone and understand where it is at any moment in time and do the same thing with instrumentation.
Okay.
There's no registration process.
Awesome. So how quickly do you think, or how much do you think this can speed up these procedures that are currently happening? How quick do you think you can get them down to when you're using Redefine's AI platform?
I think we'll see like a 10-minute knee as a common knee procedure. Right now, typical knee procedure for robotics is around 45 minutes. And a very high volume surgeon who's doing it very efficiently can get it down to 16, 17 minutes consistently. But that's the rarity. I'd say that a 25, 30-minute knee is probably considered really fast. Charlie DeCook does 12 by 12, right? So he's obviously starting pretty early in the morning to do that, but he's able to do a very efficient procedure. But I think we can do a robotic knee in about 10 minutes.
Okay. Well, that's
or even traditional knee. That's the benefit. We can even do it traditionally in that same amount of time.
That's a huge time saving. And is this to try and give, well, I suppose you can start moving this more into outpatient settings and the ASCs as well, when you're getting the speed down and when you've got a smaller footprint robot, of course. But when you're driving this time and efficiency savings, you can change the centers of care from being the big hospitals to ASCs. Is that a key play that you're going for?
Yeah, that's already been happening for years, and we're just, building tools that'll fit into the ASC. Giant robot systems don't easily fit. Much smaller, nimble systems will. And by making any tool navigated, any tool robotic, you can really accomplish that.
Okay, excellent, excellent. So what's the end vision for Redefine? What do you want to be the impact of the company on the orthopedics world?
Yeah, I'd say that in orthopedics, we want to progress from a next generation navigation solution um, to a broader solution that looks at many more things. We've already started capturing what happens on the back table to understand back table efficiency. We've already started looking at the entire procedure. So we've built a technology that can capture an entire procedure, break it down into different components, and then understand those areas. The more nuanced things, like how would you do the comb over approach on a patient versus how would you do a mid-vastus or sub-vastus, whatever approach you want to use, whatever you want to call it. All these different approaches can be done with more precision, more understanding. And ultimately, we're aiming to build a an intelligence around what do the experts do. So we're building AI based on surgeons and how they do the procedure, and then commonizing that across that group of experts. So here, let's say 10 doctors doing top level mechanical alignment in the knee using traditional instrumentation, looking at that procedure and building a model and a set of AI agents around what they would need to do surgery. And it's not for them, but it's for their future fellows. It's for people who are not as trained or not as familiar or not as high volume, and really built for the more common orthopedic surgeon who doesn't have that experience in the operating room at that level of skill.
And how are you collecting this data? Where does your data come from at the moment?
Well, we've been able to partner with a large number of orthopedic surgeons and go into their operating rooms, film them as part of some very basic work initially. So like I said, we've probably been to over 100 surgeries to date, and that's been with our customers as well as with our surgeon partners. Over time, the technologies we're developing around the navigation solution will allow us to go into more surgeries and acquire more data easily. So it'll help not only navigate the whole procedure, but also help it understand what's happening in that procedure.
Okay. And when you collect the data, are you going for like the absolute top quality data, or i.e. like where it's best in class surgeries, or are you collecting all the data at the minute, and how are you going to build out this data pool as you move forward?
Great question. It's not always around years of experience, and it's not always around who they trained under, right? We're ultimately filming surgeons that we believe have very good skill from our experience in the past. But we've met new surgeons who may not have as high volume, who are excellent physicians. A lot of this is coming through recommendations. So obviously it's coming from people we know and trust who has, good hands, as they say, in the operating room. But I'd say that the experience breeds speed and efficiency. So as the surgeons get a bit more under their belt, the timing can really be condensed into less and less time, which is a key part of what we're trying to accomplish, just because of the sheer number of patients that will need surgery over the next decade.
Okay, sure. So what's next for the company? What are the next milestones? What are you guys working towards at the minute?
We have a really big push to deploy our first solution to initial customer. We have a few more coming on that are intrigued by what we're doing and partnering with us. Ultimately, we're here to partner with the device company to introduce our technology into their solutions. So instead of becoming a competing company, we want to be kind of like the Intel inside of their tech. And that's really where we intend to be. There's some other companies that have gone to market directly, and they have to build their own sales teams and they have to build their own distribution channels. I really like partnering with the device company so that they benefit from the technology. They white label it. It's their regulatory team that deploys the solution and their engineering team that validates the solution with their products. Because this always comes back to the device. And in our case, in orthopedics, the device is the implant, and we're just a component of the device.
Sure. Well, you've got a very large danger of working with Stryker once again, given that they have the most popular robot out there. So, and if you're looking to work with those device companies to help deploy on their robots, like, let's talk about the surgical robotics space in orthopedics so far, because everyone knows Stryker. We have Rosa, we have Think Surgical developing a solution, we have Monogram Orthopedics coming out of Texas. If you are you going to have problems with partnering with more than one of the device companies, or more than one of the robotics companies, or are you aiming to partner with more of the actual implant companies that utilize some of the other robots that are more implant agnostic? Like, what do you think of the orthopedic robotics space right now? What's the key trends at play, and like, how are you gonna, drive in this
Great
market?
question. No, it's a great question. I think the smart play for us is to focus on the companies that have meaningful distribution already. So we're talking to companies that have anywhere from 50,000 to 250,000 procedures they're doing every year in this area of the world, in knees and hips and shoulders, whatever they're doing. And it's more straightforward for us to work with them than to try to work with another technology company, right? So, for example, Monogram and Think have, very little distribution in the grand scheme of things. They're doing maybe hundreds of cases. So an integration at a phase like that doesn't make sense. They've spent all their R&D dollars on getting live, not on a next generation solution. We're more interested in mid-sized device company. They might have a navigation solution already that we integrate with. They may have one that they may not have one. They might have a robot. It might be a different kind of robot. They might want a robot. So we'd rather partner with those companies and collaborate with the device companies directly.
Okay. And speaking of the device companies, they obviously, and we talked about a little bit about commercialization. So what do you see as the role of the rep moving forward with these device companies versus how it's been for the last 10, 15 years? What do you see the rep's role going into the future?
I think the rep remains for a very long time. I think it's going to be hard to replace what they do. We put a lot of faith and belief in really strong technical reps being in the operating room, assisting the surgery. And there's lots of reasons behind that. Right now, if you look at the Stryker solution that people are putting, there's actually two reps. There's a sales rep that's handling the implants, and there's the robotics, I think they call them product specialist, Mako product specialist. So I don't know if there's a need for two in the future. I think the companies will want to do it with a single person, but that rep has got to be able to leave the room and handle another surgery down the hall, and things can't stop. So a big part of what the rep does is back table and understanding what's going on with the scrub tech who's preparing the instruments and handing them to the surgeon. They're using a laser pointer and they're pointing to the instruments and telling them what's to come next. And that's due to the complexity of the current systems. I believe that that role can be something that an AI, along with some light technology, can assist with. So the rep doesn't have to worry so much about the back table that they can't do their job in other operating rooms around. And I see their job as having significant technical experience in areas that they've seen 10 cases just like what the surgeon is about to do, and the surgeon might have only seen a few. And that's the experience that you can't easily replace with technology today.
Do you feel that the reps are undervalued in the tech ecosystem today?
Absolutely. I've been actually struggling with how poorly they are being treated. There's been a real struggle around reps. Some of these hospitals, they make them wear the red hats. They make them wear these plastic scrubs that end up ripping and breaking, and they have to put on 3 during a day because they're so poorly made. I can't believe we're making such important members of the team go through that. Sometimes if they leave a certain area, they have to put on a new pair of scrubs. That is just a little nuts that happens within the same hospital area, where you'll see folks with cloth scrubs going back and forth. So for us, reps are an important part of this relationship with our technology. We expect one day they're involved with the vision system, just like they are on the Mako side. But they're also enabled to do more things because of it. So I'd like to see the rep as an important part of the team for a very long time.
I've seen a lot of talk on LinkedIn from a lot of people in the orthopedic space actually talking about the challenges of the scrubs, and there's a certain scrub company that's mentioned, which I'll allow you to mention if you would like to. But do you feel that how problematic is that for both the hospitals, the health systems, but also the companies that are partnering with these? Is how problematic is having a company which has such a poor product that doesn't actually seem to be needed at the moment?
Yeah, it's a real struggle. I mean, you have something that's worked for over 100 years, right? Scrubs have been around for a very long time, operating room wear like this. And they've gotten very efficient, and they're relatively easy to clean. But I understand the hospitals' concern, because they're paying for people who are not their employees to wear their scrubs, and they're paying for the renewal of those scrubs. So I see the hospital's perspective. I just think the solution of paper scrubs does not make sense. And paper, plastic, whatever material it is, it's not breathable, it's not sturdy. The seams rip, and this was admitted by their own company that they don't have a good enough product. On a recent conversation, one of the surgeons that I follow and have collaborated with on surgeries, he's been bringing up this, and this is Dr. Brian Blackwood out of Boulder. He's openly been a supporter of something better for our reps, and I'm a big believer and supporter of this as well. We should have scrubs that allow them to do their jobs, that are not going to rip, that are able to be cleaned and swapped out during the day without costing $30, $40 out of the rep's pocket. I think a lot of people forget that some of these reps are technical reps, very young, right out of school, few years of experience. They're not making that much money, and for a few $1,000s a year is a very large amount of their income. Not every rep is driving in Mercedes Benzes and Hummers and big old American type cars. I think there's a lot of reps out there that are struggling day to day, and adding that extra expense it's just unfathomable.
Another quick interruption to tell you about our sponsors, KUKA. KUKA is a global leader in robotics with over 25 years of experience partnering with medtech companies on their journey to market. Their reputation is built on robust technology, reliability, and long-term collaboration. More than a supplier, KUKA provides trusted support throughout the product lifecycle, from development to integration and beyond. For companies exploring robotic solutions, the KUKA LBR Med offers a ready-to-integrate, state-of-the-art option that meets the highest medical standards, without the need to build from scratch. If you want to find out more, then head to the show notes and follow the link to KUKA's website.
So diving back into the company side then, so you guys are actively raising your seed round. What's that capital going to be able to allow you guys to do? Where's that going to take you to as the next stage?
Yeah, we're really seeing it as this booster of the technology we've developed and helping our first customers take it to market. So the early partners we've established and are talking to are very eager with what we've developed, but we've built a model to keep the initial cost to them to a reasonable level. And we're doing that through the financing of the company. So that allows us to bring on more customers, bring them on faster. We could see ourselves at about 10 or 12 medical device companies by this time next year. And that's a potential for hundreds of thousands of procedures in the next 5 years. And that's really what we're looking at.
Okay. So because of the nature of the products and the technology, do you have what's the regulatory pathway you guys have to go through?
The way we're setting it up is we're partnering with the device company to take their version of the product through. In a previous startup, I thought the right way to do this was to build the product, get the clearance, and then kind of rinse and repeat with medical device companies. But what ends up happening is everyone has a different goal, a different objective, different technologies, right? So we are going to the companies early enough that they're starting to think about how to integrate our solution into their existing products that they already have, a few that are in development. And there are some mid-sized companies that are in the robotic space and experimenting with what they can do there. But now they see us as an enabler by speeding up their development, speeding up their surgeries with something that's going to be much more efficient. But it always comes back to the implant and fitting to their implant and how it's supposed to be inserted, implanted, positioned. And that comes very heavily back to their surgeons and how the surgeons design the product. So we can study the surgeons, we can understand what they're doing from a purely a vision perspective. We can apply that to models that get used into their devices, into their AI that they submit to the FDA.
Okay. And what would be the value add to the company, to the medical device company, to add Redefine on? Is this a play for them to capture more revenue opportunities? Obviously, speeding up, are they going to make more money from this, or is it adding more value to the customer? What's the key message that you're giving to them as you try and deploy into medical device companies?
Yeah, I'd say the mid-tier are in a tough spot because there's a desire for more technology to be used in surgery, and they don't always have that technology themselves. So another vendor comes in that has a technology solution, and they become a partner, but the device company doesn't get that revenue. So let's say you're using a third-party navigation solution that's on the market, or a third-party robotic solution. The hospital is either paying for that or the device company. And that's either hurting your margin or reducing your revenue. We believe the opportunity to integrate at the beginning allows us to charge a very small amount, and then allows the medical device companies to charge a considerable amount to their customers, just like they're currently paying in the market. So price above and beyond the Mako, for example, I've heard anywhere from $2,000 to $3,500, depending upon how you look at it, and disposables, etc. Mm-hmm. Well, if you're a mid-tier company, you're not making that margin on that additional revenue. You're making zero. You're using somebody else's technology, and they're making that $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 per case. Mm-hmm. And that's how we see the opportunity to bring that back to the medical device company.
Sure. Okay. Cool. So in your journey as an entrepreneur and setting up 3 companies, what are some of the biggest lessons you've learned along the way, and maybe some of the harshest lessons you've had to learn?
Yeah, definitely. I'd say, the process of fundraising, who to put on your cap table, when to get them there, is a critical one. When do you fundraise? At what moments of inflection? And I'd say also the team that you're building. So it always comes back to people, whether you're investors or your founders or your early team members. People really make or break an organization, and be able to bring those people in, give them every chance they can to do well, to exceed your expectations. When they don't, to help them get through that. Sometimes to let them go and let them find the right opportunity for them. So I think people on both the employee front, the co-founder front, as well as the medical device, the investor front, critical. Your early customers are also super important, and that's why we've specifically chosen to talk to companies that we appreciate, and those early customers are going to make or break you if they take you down the wrong rabbit holes versus where you really want to go.
So you mentioned about getting the right investors there. Did you learn any lessons from the previous startups? What was the what actually happened for you to understand and learn that lesson, if you can talk about it?
Yeah, you know, people talk about like, do you want 100% of a grape or 100% of a watermelon? Sorry, 100% of a grape or 10% of a watermelon, right? That's the phrase we say in VC. So 100% of a grape is very small, right? And if you don't raise capital and only bootstrap, there's only so much speed and growth you can have, especially when you're building something that's very capital intensive like AI. When I was in a previous startup, I had spent a lot of time building our initial traction and go-to-market, initial revenue. We had even acquired our first company before we had a real seed round together. We had done it at the like $250,000 raise of a pre-seed. We had acquired a company already. And those are hard things to do early. This time we started raising capital right at the beginning. We've raised almost 2 million in dilutive and non-dilutive sources. And that's given us ability to build a team and grow the company and tackle really hard problems early. But then as we look at future financings, we're not doing it from positions of weakness. My last company, we had a term sheet right before COVID at a $15 to $20 million valuation, I think it was. And it was a good term sheet, and it was just the right amount of money that we needed. And then when COVID came, that disappeared as our revenue disappeared. And we ended up coming back and having a much lower valuation at that next round. That was timing I couldn't have predicted. We went from 2 million of revenue down to just hundreds of thousands of revenue a year. That's a challenge to go through those moments. But it taught me a ton around what dilution really looks like at those stages, and what all those terms in the term sheet that you hear about, what they really mean. So this time around, finding the right partners at the right time, not only for your team, but also for your investors, it's a critical part of the process.
Indeed. And the other side is the team as well. So how have you brought together the team? I know you've brought some people from not necessarily, I'd say, backgrounds which you've come across and you've just been like, look, this is a great person, let's hire them, rather than you're getting people rather than saying we have a role. You're getting people and then building the role around them. So talk to me a little bit about how that's worked.
Yeah, we've been very fortunate to have a good network and hear through the grapevine that somebody's interested in what we're doing. And then you get to reconnect with that person and realize, wow, this would be a perfect addition to our team in this area. And sometimes that timing works out perfectly and you're like, okay, great. We have a role. Sometimes it takes a few months or even, a year to get that person on board. But timing is important. Knowing that relationship, knowing like what they've built before and who they worked with and their personality. Like my co-founders are all people I've known for, either 12 or 20 years. And that's a unique ability to be able to know someone for that long. I'd never worked with either of them, but I'd always been really impressed with what they had accomplished in their own careers. And it's really important to like the people you work with. And that also came very natural for the team. Hiring is a matter of knowing what you need next, or thinking you know what you need next, and then finding the right person that can not only tackle that, but probably tackle a few more things that you haven't yet thought of. So you're looking for some versatility as well.
Awesome. So we're coming to the end of our time. What's one thing you want to leave the audience with about Redefine Surgery?
Yeah, I think in the early days, we were putting out some cool videos just because we were testing the technology and what it could do. And we're even starting to get some interest in selling that as a product. We had some, and still do have some people that want to use it for marketing purposes. But the really cool thing about what we've done is built a technology that applies across more complex scenarios. So we're building artificial intelligence that will understand the procedure, understand how your expert surgeons implant the device, and be able to put that into the hands of every single one of your surgeons. And I think that's it always came back to education and training, but not only from like a human watching a video, but from an AI understanding what's happening in that video. And I think that's been a key thing we started with, and we weren't fully disclosing why we were doing it. But now it's a bit more obvious that we're starting to share a bit more.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for spending time with me today, Peter. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. It's been great to connect.
Thank you so much for joining me on the Crux of MedTech podcast. If you're not already doing so, please go ahead and subscribe on YouTube or follow the podcast on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. This podcast is proudly brought to you by Crux. Crux is a medtech search firm which places pioneers in transformative roles to help us live longer, healthier lives. We do 3 things for companies. We help hire world-class executive talent. We help companies raise investment from Series A to Series C and execute upon M&A. And we also are building a community of medtech leaders to facilitate peer-to-peer learning and accelerate the companies to help them go faster. If you're interested in any of those 3 things, please reach out to me on LinkedIn or follow the link in the show notes to find out more. Thank you.